Hi, welcome back. Now, in this video, I would like to officially introduce you to Karen. This is Karen, my wife, my better half, or other half, or whatever. And what I wanted to do was just break this section up just a little bit, because we've had a few quite heavy conversations and I've shared a lot of big ideas with you so far. So what I figured we would do here is just, first and foremost, introduce you to Karen. Karen's going to be coming back to help me demonstrate some of the models and processes that I'll be demonstrating and guiding you through later in the course. But here I thought we could just maybe have a conversation about extreme thinking styles, cognitive biases, and how it is that in practicality they can actually impact not just the quality of our lives, but the quality of our day-to-day relationships, marriages, how we relate to people.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I know that, having heard you speak in the last video, both inferiority and Superman have kind of come into play in our relationship.
So superiority complex, or Superman and inferiority have both come into play?
Yes, they have, yeah. I know from my own experience, I've spent a lot of my own life under that inferiority complex.
Under inferiority. I'm not sure if that's just a Scottish thing, all right? And that's just a theory, by the way, but it definitely is common throughout our culture. How did this outwork itself in your life, would you say, before and after we met?
Yeah, I mean, you shed a little bit light previously about how I'm musical and I'm gifted. I can sing and play the piano, but for the whole of my 20s, I didn't do anything with that talent, just through that fear of what I've got's not enough. Like, it's really uncomfortable to put myself outside of the comfort zone and try something. It's better just to do something safe and that I can easily relate to.
Do something safe. Could you give us an example? Now, I know that obviously we work together today, creating these courses and hosting discussions, and we're both involved inside of the various communities, Facebook Ecology. So yeah, you were musically gifted in the past, but that wasn't what you invested your late teens and 20s into, was it?
No. I went away to university and studied occupational therapy.
Occupational therapy, and on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being really engaging and interesting, 1 being not engaging or interesting at all, how did you find that?
Oh, about 2. I wasn't very interested in it. My heart wasn't in it at all.
So you weren't interested, your heart wasn't in it, not interested. So why is it that you would devote 4 years to studying something like this that you weren't even particularly passionate about?
Honestly, it was, in some ways, was following in my family's footstep. My mum was a nurse, and something of like occupational therapy was similar to that, and it seemed safe, seemed like a good option.
Following in your family's footsteps. I'm just wondering if there's a cognitive bias that we've already looked at that's kind of similar to.
Yeah, I'm sure that fits into one of them.
What was the one called? Can you remember at home? The one where we do things sometimes because other people were doing it, or we'll pursue a certain career path because other family members have done that.
Like the bandwagon effect.
The bandwagon effect, just a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of this conversation, to have a discussion and see if we can just identify how many of these actually come into play. I want you to follow along, because this section of the course is about you really growing in insight and understanding. So we want to share as much as what we can of our own experience to really help you in this process. So the bandwagon effect. So how has this historically impacted or influenced your decision making, just on your own?
That's quite a severe pattern in my life, actually, that I will tend to follow other people and what they think I should do or what they're doing. Something that I can see is safe, rather than using my own mind and going with my own gut and using my own passions. And I'll tend to hold back on these things and rather just go with what someone else might suggest.
Well, that's interesting. So tell me, if you've got an example of those people, how is it that you find yourself relating to those people? Who could be anyone? How do you find yourself relating to people when you're trying to fit in, or?
I find myself almost going with the flow, being a bit unauthentic at times, and doing things that they're not integral, not because I want to do them. Sometimes just keeping people happy.
So sometimes your priority will be more keeping people happy
Yeah.
than actually just being yourself and doing your own thing. And what do you see a reason might be for this? Just in response to the cognitive biases and the distorted patterns of thinking and believing that we can succumb to in life, the ones that I've shared over the last few videos.
Yeah. There's always been this kind of need to keep other people happy, and I hate to let other people down.
So if this is the case, how do you relate to them? Where do you see them in comparison to you? Above, beneath, superior, inferior, the same as? How do you relate to people?
Although I'm getting much better at being aware of this in the present now, like a lot of my life I've looked up to people, so I've put myself down.
So you put people on a pedestal, and as a result of this, you actually put yourself down.
I put myself down, yeah.
Is this kind of like an inferiority effect complex?
Absolutely, yeah. And I can completely relate to that in the context of our marriage, where in the early days, I had you on a huge pedestal where I would look up to you almost like the Superman, actually, where I was inferior and I would just go with what you would say rather than bringing my own input or my own insight or whatever.
And it's interesting you say that, because if we're just going to be honest here, that was probably one of the biggest issues that we had in the early stages of our marriage, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Till death do us part and all that kind of thing. But what I picked up on was that you were more committed to trying to appease me or please me or get it right than actually just be yourself. So I never knew where I stood with you.
Yeah.
It came at the cost of trust and connection in the relationship as well. And this is all how our cognitions impact not just our relationships, but our day-to-day interactions, what we do, everything. This impacts how well we play the inner game and directly determines how well we turn up and show up in the outside world.
Absolutely, yeah. And that would come at the cost of trust in our relationship. And often it would mean that I would just allow you to make decisions in everything. And
mindlessly.
And it's actually, when you start looking at it, it's inferiority, but it's also, you can kind of get comfortable on that level where you stop making any effort.
You do. It's kind of like we can sometimes just become reliant on other people telling us what to do, thinking for us, and all this. Now, there is a discipline. One of the other disciplines that we teach is mindfulness. Now, there's a few different ways of looking at mindfulness, isn't there? There's the mindfulness approach, which leaves people sitting still and meditating and humming and hawing and letting their minds go empty. I would refer to that as mindlessness. All right. Some people confuse mindfulness with mindlessness. Mindfulness is very, very different. It's actually about us being aware of what we are mindful of, what it is that we are thinking about, our biases, our prejudices, why we're doing what we're doing. There's a big difference between being aware of what's going on inside of our mind, i.e. our cognitions, and something else just being completely mindless, i.e. not thinking for ourselves, being completely devout of thought.
Mindless is like kind of switching off from the world, whereas mindful is like
engaging
and proactively looking to do something about the assumptions and the biases that you've
developed.
Interesting. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, what I would like to do, if it's okay with you, darling wife, what I thought would be interesting, all right, is just talk about how our relationship changed and the quality of our relationship changed as your perception of me and of yourself changed. Do you remember when we first met? We actually met in church, believe it or not, all right? She was a religious one, not me, all right? And for the first, 4, 5, 6 months, were you not of a certain mindset about me?
I was. That was absolutely rotten back then. I believed that the way I was living life was right.
So you were getting life right. You'd chosen the right team.
I'd chosen the right team.
You'd chosen Team Jesus, and that was the right team. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had chosen the...
Well, you just weren't quite there yet.
I wasn't quite there yet, so I wasn't quite meeting the grade. I wasn't flying my flag
No.
or anything like this. So I'm just wondering then, all right, if back then perhaps you were of Superman complex and I was perhaps slightly inferior?
I'd actually never made that link before, but that's
I did.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
So our relationship started there, but then as your perception of me changed over time.
Yeah. Yeah, our relationship started where I looked down.
You looked down on me at the start, didn't you? You did. I can remember that very well.
Yeah. But then I think it's actually as I started kind of realising that facade, that belief that I had that I was living life the right way was actually quite inaccurate. That I started sort of realising that actually, no, I'm not really... I'm just an average person, there's not really anything super special about me here.
That's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it, how we start relating to ourselves and other people differently. When we start gauging ourselves, not by what we think or by what we know or by what we believe, but instead of what it is that we're producing, what are the outcomes that are actually coming from our life? What are the consequences of how we are, how we be, what we do, what we say? There's a different way it's like two different ways of judging ourselves, isn't there? We can judge ourselves by what we think, and then we can judge ourselves by the outcomes of our works, right? Which is actually a very, very healthy way to critique and evaluate ourselves or other people. There's a lot of talkers out there. There's a few doers. It's good to be a doer, isn't it? And this is kind of why we have this conversation, to more show you how it is that no pattern of thought, no way of thinking is static, right? Nothing ever remains the same. As we are presented with new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of looking at life, new information, new experiences, sometimes as we get to know people deeper, our perceptions, our cognitions change, all right? It's where, I think over the last few videos I've suggested that some people put themselves in boxes and say, I am this label, this is who I am, and really box themselves in and limit themselves. And as human beings, it's kind of like we all want to be free, but sometimes we all make ourselves prisoners of our own thoughts. It's kind of like the greatest prisons known to man aren't those made of dense, reinforced concrete and cast iron bars, but are actually just comprised of the quality of our thoughts, whether we believe that we can, whether we believe that we can't, whether we believe that we are good enough or not good enough, our actions will follow. They will be a result of.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that prison that you kind of create for yourself in your own thinking, because that inferiority complex resulted in me, not taking risks, not trying new things, but then, once I became aware of it and started doing things that were outside my comfort zone, then you start to break your own rules. You realise that, I could do that one thing, which means what else could I do?
Yeah.
So you start to grow.
Another link that I'd made was that Karen was a Bible college student, weren't you? So Karen went to Bible college and all this kind of thing. And Karen had studied her Bible inside out. I hadn't, all right? I'd developed some life skills and learned some life lessons. So Karen, you were also operating out of this information bias back then. You seemed to be of the mindset, when we first met anyway, that all this information that you had, that you knew, was kind of like the gospel. Now I'm using that word, the gospel, because you do get gospels in the Bible and all that sort of thing. And whilst that information is nice, unless we are being impacted or changed or allowing ourselves to be influenced by information, then it's just dead, lifeless information, right? Information without application is completely pointless, it's irrelevant.
I think that's totally true, and it was a false sense of security that I had.
A false sense of security, kind of like Superman complex again.
Relating back to those early days where I look down on you a bit because I felt I had all this knowledge of, I've studied the Bible, I've been to Bible school, but actually when I got to know you and realised that you devote your life to giving to other people, you coach other people,
applying
this stuff all the time, and I realised that what's more valuable,
having a head full of knowledge or a heart full of insight and understanding that comes through practical application.
Yes, yeah. That's so true.
Interesting discussion, Karen. Thank you. Listen, there's no other real main takeaways. I just wanted to, in this video, introduce you to Karen, us just to have an informal conversation, all right, to show you how it is that these principles and ideas actually outwork themselves in every single area of our lives. Yeah, we've talked about our marriage here, but if you were to really start applying cognitive biases and your understanding now of them to the different aspects of your life, you might be surprised as to what you go on to find and how you find they're actually influencing your decision making, your attitudes towards other people, and how they sometimes might be coming at the cost of you actually getting more of what you want. Never ever get wedged or stuck in this mindset that you know it all, because we don't, right? If you do, my friend, you're trapped in information bias. It's just a bias. It's one that we can outgrow and overcome. The process of growth, as I've mentioned a few times, and I'm not going to stop repeating this one, it's about growing up and out of the limiting ways of thinking and believing that we develop about ourselves, about life, about other people back when we're young. Is this okay?
This is okay.
Is this okay? I sincerely hope so, friends. It's a CBT practitioner course with a difference. Hope you're enjoying it so far, and we'll see you again in the next clip.